I think it's fair to call Oppenheimer the most hyped up film of the year. It's certainly the most excited I have been for a film in a while. It's not simply that it's a new Christopher Nolan film, one of the few directors who can get masses of people into the cinema with just his name alone. It's the fact that, after the bloated mess that was Tenet, Nolan is returning to a more grounded and dramatic film, something he was really good at making yet hasn't done so since The Prestige, which now is over a decade and a half old. Similarly, it's the first big summer blockbuster in a very, very long while which isn't a genre film, but a drama that's primarily targeted toward adults. The latter point makes the movie feel like almost a retro experience, even though the film itself is profoundly modern, and I am so glad that after finally getting to see it, it marks a return to form for Nolan. Oppenheimer is an intelligent, captivating, and ultimately terrifying experience. And though the film is definitely flawed at points in its pacing and writing, this is still must-see cinema. One of the smartest and most cinematic decisions made in the script is that the film's dramatic tension doesn't come from whether or not the US successfully creates a nuclear weapon. We know the answer to this. So rather than attempt to keep the audience on the edge of their seats following a narrative with a predetermined outcome, Nolan does this through the film's moral questions. It's not about the bomb itself, but about the meaning of its creation. It's a thought-provoking film, and Nolan takes the trademark complexity of his science fiction films and transposes it into a historical drama. There's multiple timelines and a lot of details to keep track of, and it comes together in a very satisfying way during the film's climax. That being said, even with its 3-hour runtime, the film does try to cram way too much into the narrative. The film's pacing is brisk, and though sometimes this works to the movie's advantage, at times the writing, directing, and editing can be so fast that it feels like the start of an old television show where they'd recap what happened before, as if the movie is going, "Previously on Oppenheimer." This is mainly a problem in the first act, which really did need a good bit of editing. It shoves so much in so quickly that it very much needed to expand on quite a bit of it while cutting out the rest. Once we actually get to the Manhattan Project though, the film settles down a tad and I found myself glued to my seat. The film looks spectacular, and I was lucky enough to catch it on IMAX 70mm, and it's an awe-inspiring experience. Nolan's commitment to large format analog renders the film's image in such detail. The lighting has such a grit to it. The hot desert sun shines so brightly as to leave the cinematography a little overexposed, and it really adds to the atmosphere and the feeling of the uncanny. And when you see it in IMAX, much of the film takes up your entire peripheral vision, forcing you headfirst into the film's subject matter. And though some of the IMAX aspect ratio changes are quite jarring, it didn't overall impact my enjoyment of the film. The level of cinematic detail also extends to the film's special effects sequences. From the visualization of quantum particles to the much anticipated and hyped Trinity test sequence, it's not simply the level of detail and technical beauty of the imagery, but the fact that these scenes and shots are used to enhance the storytelling and give us a rounded picture of both Oppenheimer's mental state and the science behind the bomb. In addition to that, the production design also deserves a shout out. It very much looks like they just built a small town in the middle of the desert. The sets are detailed and realistic, capturing the ramshackled nature of this experimental operation had to be put together at such short notice. And I hope to see some awards recognition for production designer Ruth De Jong, who also worked on Twin Peaks: The Return, which also has an incredible Trinity test scene, as well as art director Anthony Perillo. Nolan's direction of all these storytelling aspects comes together to create such a powerful, doomy atmosphere. Once they begin work on the bomb, which is euphemistically referred to as the gadget, you just get this horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach which doesn't let up and only grows more uncomfortable. This is definitely aided by Ludwig Göransson's score, which is a major step up from his work on Tenet. It's dissonant and off-kilter in a way which I'm sure was inspired by Johnny Greenwood's work on There Will Be Blood. And though there are moments when it's either mixed into the film too loud or where the film would have done better to have no score, overall the music certainly adds to the film's power. This weighty and upsetting feeling is of course completely apt for the subject matter. Ever since The Dark Knight ended with its weird pro-surveillance climax, there's been much speculation on Nolan's politics and whether or not he's indeed right-wing. I myself was expecting the film to be largely a statement of logistical facts, leaving the audience to make up their minds. However, Oppenheimer is a profoundly anti-nuclear weapons movie, and Nolan executes this, something which he clearly must feel very strongly about, with intelligence and subtlety, trusting the audience to understand the dramatic irony and disconnect between the creation and use of these weapons and the reaction of many of the film's characters. Jingoism is the enemy here, in both of the movie's timelines. Whether it be the obstinance of, the US must build these weapons, they must keep building them, they must be as powerful as possible, and we must drop them no matter what the evidence is to the contrary, or all the ways the US government can completely discredit and ruin someone's life that are outside of a courtroom in a fair trial, US nuclear policy and governmental dogma is firmly in Nolan's line of sight. All opinions on Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and nuclear proliferation are shown here, but so too is the utter disregard for viewpoints that are not the absolute most hawkish. Warnings about the worldly existence of these weapons will create are shrugged mugged off as leftists, and any attempt to suggest they can get the Japanese to surrender without committing 2 war crimes are brushed aside. As one military general says, "Trust us, the Japanese won't surrender under any circumstances." Through historical retrospect, we know this is untrue, that these intentional targeting of civilian areas were not a simple utilitarian decision, well, it'll save more lives overall, and that many counterpoints to this line of reasoning come up repeatedly in this film, only for them to be completely dismissed by a group of people that are already set on dropping the bomb come what may. Indeed, Gary Oldman's portrayal of President Truman himself is a very cynical one, and through his performance he's clearly trying to make the connection in the audience's minds between him and George W. Bush. This is a bloodless war movie. We only hear about what these weapons can do, and see the different reactions to this, some of which are absolutely terrifying to see. Nolan handles the subject matter with a real bleakness and intelligence, but perhaps there was room in the film to be a little more confrontational with the audience. As unpopular a decision as it would have been, I would have liked him to have shown the audience, even briefly, some real historical footage. This isn't a large complaint. I really have nothing but praise for how the film approaches its subject matter, and the fact that it can provoke such powerful emotion through largely implication and dramatic irony is a testament to its strength. But nevertheless, there is perhaps one scene in the film in which, as upsetting as it would have been, the real-life horror of the film could have been ramped up in the name of education. On a final note, the acting in this film is superb. Cillian Murphy will no doubt receive a Best Actor nomination for the titular role. Oppenheimer's arc is incredibly engaging and performed with nuance and empathy. This is a film about a man who slowly gave up his principles as he becomes a part of the war machine and the consequences of that. Again, there's a lot of power in this film through subtle implication, and both Murphy and Nolan have a very layered understanding of the film's script and ideas. Robert Oppenheimer is not portrayed in a glowing light. He's a genius, of course, but his blind sight may well not only be unforgivable, but also motivated by many factors, some of which are just pure selfishness. There are so many characters in this film, however, that virtually none of them are afforded any depth. Oppenheimer and General Groves, played by Matt Damon, are fleshed out and expertly performed, while Downey Jr.'s character gets at least 2.5 dimensions to him. Other than that, however, most of the other characters are just there to express viewpoints and move the story along. They're not well defined except in their political and scientific beliefs, as well as their relationship to and thoughts on Oppenheimer himself. This is another part of the script requiring a bit more focus and a slower pace, and though I'm sure it would not be possible to round every single person on screen in this film, a greater focus on detailing some of the supporting roles was needed, and while at times this is forgivable, at others it's not. At time of writing, the film has only been out for a day, and there's already so much discourse on Florence Pugh's character, which I must say is a fairly egregious example of a female character being written with absolutely zero care put into making her even two-dimensional. All this aside, however, this is an incredibly layered work that's both cerebral and deeply emotional. There's a real power to this film, and lots of nuances to pick apart. Nolan has done a real service in creating this movie. It's a chilling work, but also one of genuine importance. Though it would be hard for anyone not an established expert to pick apart the timeline and the portrayal of events in relation to what actually transpired, Nolan's film gets to a truth, a layered and expertly explored truth about how the creation of and use of nuclear weapons changed the world forever. And though I think you'd be hard-pressed to call this film a masterpiece, Christopher Nolan has shown us again exactly why he's one of the biggest names in cinema. So I'm going to give Oppenheimer an 8 out of 10. So what did you think of Oppenheimer? As always, let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider tipping me on Ko-Fi. The link is in the description, and also in the description is the link to my podcast, the Extreme Cinema Podcast. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.